Today, we're going to be talking about scaling automation across your talent journey without all the headaches that come along with it. And I am delighted to be joined today by Chris Johnson and Jason Jakes. Chris is a good friend. He is the Director of Industry Strategy at Checkr. But Chris, I will let you introduce yourself.
Thanks, Pankaj. So pleasure to be here, everyone. So Chris Johnson, I work on our industry strategy and market development team at Checkr. And I've been in and around HR tech, HR outsourcing and staffing for about 23 years now. So there's really not a lot that I haven't seen. And I definitely have some strong perspectives. So looking forward to unpacking some things today.
Yeah, likewise, Chris. And Jason, will you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure thing. Director of Solutions Consulting here at Sense, and spent the last 20 years in the HR and staffing industry. A lot of those years, 12 or so, were at a ATS, and another 4 or so was at a systems integrator before I joined Sense about 2 years ago. And I'll be happy to show you around and, like Chris, unpack some things and demonstrate various parts of our product.
Awesome. Thank you, Jason. And my name is Pankaj, same as Chris and Jason, been in the staffing industry forever, 22 years at this point. Before I founded Sense, I ran staffing companies for about 15 years, and I was very much a hands-on operator. So there probably isn't a skeleton in the closet that I have seen or I haven't seen. So please ask any number of questions, no matter how detailed they might get. We're looking forward to a lively discussion. With that, for those of you who have not come across Sense before, I just wanted to give you a quick overview on Sense. Like I said, we started the company about 5.5 years ago at the beginning of 2016. Our singular mission at the time was to build a talent engagement platform. And when I say platform, we wanted to build something that just contained every aspect of engagement. And we've stayed very true to that mission, as hopefully we will demonstrate over the course of the next 45 minutes or so. We today have over 500 customers that automate most of their candidate engagement, actual employee engagement, hiring manager engagement, recruiter productivity using Sense. We also work with a third of the largest staffing companies in the US. And we are SOC 2 Type 2 certified. We're very proud of this. We take our customers' data and privacy very seriously. So we've gotten the highest level of certification that there is. And along this journey, we've raised about $40 million from some really well-known blue chip investors like Axel Partners, Google, as well as Avatar. So that's a little bit about Sense. I will invite Chris to tell you guys a little bit more about Checkr.
Yeah, thanks. So a little bit about Checkr. We used to say we were the biggest background check company you never heard of, but I like to think that that's changing. So I've been with Checkr for about 3 years now. And so I've seen several different iterations of this slide, and there's actually even a newer one, I think. But if you look at some of these stats, so 80 million background checks run and counting, over 17,000 companies served. That's a lot of background check volume that we're running. And we're best known for the work that we've done in the on-demand economy and the gig economy. We like to say we service, 95%. That's sort of a number that we always shoot towards. Don't hold me to that. But what it means is that we've really perfected a motion and a model in what it takes to succeed in today's digital economy. We're going to talk about that in a little bit, but it is very, very different. So when you take a look at the staffing firms that are sitting out there and trying to build those digital twins, that takes a different competency than what we've seen in the background check industry for the last 2 decades. So yeah, great stats. Love Checkr to death. Kind of like Sense, we've gone through some funding rounds, just announced a fresh one today or yesterday. So we're all pretty proud of that and really excited about the future is going to bring. Awesome. So let's go ahead and dig right in. This is a great slide. I think to me, I look at it and I go, it's quite the paradox. We have more jobs than we know what to do with. But yet we have the highest quit rate that we've ever seen in history. And when I look at this, it just tells me that something is broken. And one of the jobs that I have at Checkr is to actually look at the trends that are way out there. So way past the staffing firms, even way past where the buyers are, and figuring out like what's really happening here. And there's 3 that I was really been watching for the last year or two. But I think they're going to kind of still hold fast moving into 2022 as well. And one of them is something we're calling sign up culture. If you've heard me on webinars before, you've heard me talk about it, but I felt it was a good topic to bring back up with Sense, because I've not done one of these with y'all before. And what sign up culture is it's really our lives. So if you think about what you do on any given day, it's how we buy food, it's how we buy clothing, it's how we bank, it's how we get rides to and from the airport, rent vacation homes. These are all things that used to take experts, sometimes even office visits or multiple steps. And now for the most part, they can all be done with your phone. And the cool thing about the sign up culture is that, you don't have to be a tech expert. So if you're like my wife or my mom and you're using, myself, right? If you're using Amazon on a regular basis, if you take rides in Ubers, if you're using Instacart, DoorDash, which I'm doing more and more nowadays, I am part of the cohort that's really beginning to drive this motion. One of the other things that I'm really looking at, and what I'm doing is I'm trying to unpack the data that's here so you understand there's a deeper rooted issue here. And one of the other things we look at is changing expectations. So we just talked about as a society how everybody is becoming somewhat consumerized, right? We expect everything to be as easy as signing up for Instagram. Well, what this has really done is it's trained us to expect a data-driven, fluid, consumer-like experience in everything we do. And it's definitely making its way over to our professional lives and 100% making its way into hiring and recruiting. It's why companies like Checkr and Sense actually exist. So a few years ago, when I would talk to staffing companies, which I do on a daily basis, it was really just the fringe cases. So if you don't know me, I was the head of digital operations at the Adecco Group before joining Checkr. And part of one of the things I did was launch the Adia platform. I considered us a fringe case. We were really looking towards that like zero touch or low touch hiring. But today, the mainstream players are actually beginning to invest in these same things. And I think it's really interesting because the pandemic really shined a light on these changing expectations. The folks that invested early, so a few years ago or several years ago, were able to pivot instantly when we moved to effectively what was a zero touch, no branch staffing model. So the third bit here I want to talk about is a fully agile workforce. So if you follow Josh Bersin, which I hope you do, a few years ago in 2019, he talked about the pixelated workforce. And I know that 2019 feels like forever ago, but that article really stuck with me because the way that he defined it, and I'm quoting it because it's so on point, is it's people seeking work arrangements that are based on their own personal skills, location, and lifestyle. So at the time I thought, that's cool. I feel that. I feel it happening. But I think it was some like just provocative main stage content thing that he was writing. But if you really take a look at what's happening and what's happening on that screen in front of us with this data, I think we're actually seeing a workforce begin to pixelate itself and really begin to rebuild into something that I wouldn't really call the new normal. I would actually say that the workforce is beginning to form into the next workforce of the future. And I have a little proof point here in addition to what's on the page, a 2021 Pulse of Talent survey of the 5,000 respondents who said they planned to leave their jobs. 58% said it was for a lack of career development, which, okay, I can feel that, but I could also squint my eyes and tie that back to the next stat in the same survey, which 30% said they were considering a move because they wanted to take on new challenges every few years. So again, going back to that pixelated workforce, you can see that something's happening. People just aren't happy with the way that we work, the way that we engage workers, the way we find work, we're recruited, and the way that we actually get that work done. And for me, I think it's those three trends and a lot of stuff that's in the middle is what's creating that paradox between plenty of work, but people quitting.
Yeah. So, Chris, thank you. That's very, very insightful. And I think one of the things that, stands out is from what you said, everybody expects a consumer type experience now. Just as you get treated when you go to Amazon.com, that, remembers every preference of yours and what you bought last. That's exactly how, job seekers want to be treated now. In our mind today, automation is absolutely table stakes. If somebody says, hey, Contact me via email and not via text, you do that. Contact me via text and not via email, you do that. Talk to me during working hours, talk to me after working hours. You've got to remember all these preferences for thousands of people. You have to give them the personal experience that they demand, which is very much an expectation from them right now. You give somebody a poor experience one time, they're probably gone from your company forever. They're going to go, go talk to somebody else, potentially your competitor, because they're probably still in the same area and they still want the same kind of job. So they're probably going to your competitor. So, the world that we live in, as Chris just described it, there are a really high number of jobs that are open. There are a really high number of candidates that are quitting. Talent is really hard to find, which means you absolutely have to cast a wider net. If earlier you were able to reach out to 50 people and you were almost guaranteed, hey, if I reach out to 50 people, I'll find the person I'm looking for, you may have to reach out to 500 people now, but you don't have 10 times the capacity magically, which is exactly why you're going to need technology, which is exactly why you're going to need something that comes in and helps you automate that, but makes that automation super personal. So, when you think about how you're going to automate it, just, keep these key tenets that Chris and I just talked about in mind. First of all, make sure it creates a better experience for everybody. Second, it creates less work for you and not more work, because otherwise, what's the point of automation? And third, just pick partners, companies that actually understand where the focus of or the future of work is shifting, and they're tailoring technology around that, which, obviously we're very proud of, what we do, as well as, what Checkr does. So let's get a little bit into what the talent journey actually today looks like. This is how we think of the talent journey, right? The first thing you do is you capture people, you discover them, whether they come to your website, whether you reach out to them, whether they apply to a job board. But essentially, you're trying to capture people and saying, here is my top of the funnel. Here are the leads. Here are the candidates. These are the people that I will, screen, source, convert. This is where I'm, capturing these people. Then you obviously have to engage them, make sure that once you have these people, you have their attention. Once you start engaging with them, you don't drop the ball. It's not like you haven't responded to them in 3 days, because a poor experience, as we just talked about, will have them drop out of the funnel. Then, of course, once you've gotten them to a spot of hire, you have to give them just a very white glove treatment through onboarding, which is, majorly where Checkr comes in as well. And we'll talk a lot more about that. And once they're on an assignment, once they're working for you, once you're engaged with them constantly, you just want to make sure that as far as possible, they never leave your ecosystem. The biggest challenge that staffing companies deal with today is the leaky bucket syndrome. We have more people leaving and than coming in. So oftentimes you're just running on a treadmill at the same exact pace, but your revenue is never growing. So the idea that you can redeploy these people because you're giving them a great experience, you're giving them this white glove experience, they want to work with your company, essentially means your quit rates, your people who are leaving after completing their first assignment will keep decreasing, but hopefully your top of the funnel is becoming more and more efficient. So what we're going to do over the next 20 minutes or so are go through these 4 stages. We're going to talk about how Sense can help. In a couple of spots, we're actually going to show you a live product demo to give you a sense of what this could look like in real life. In a couple of spots, we're going to have Chris come in and talk about how Checkr can help. And then from there, we'll talk about how Sense and Checkr can do this together. So the first step here is discover. This is kind of what the life cycle or the workflow of discover looks like. You create a new job order, could be wherever, could be on a job board, LinkedIn, your own website, so on and so forth. You're essentially going to have various kinds of talent pool, people who apply to you, people who are already sitting in your database that you want to reach out on an outbound fashion because you're like, hey, I know these 500 people are fit for this job. Let's go check which of these 500 people are still available. So you're going to take all of your various different data sources. One of them could be referrals. You take all of these sources and you're essentially going to identify the top people who match this criteria. And once you're there, you want to make sure that your interaction with them is personalized, is swift. It very much feels like it is designed for an individual. Now, you obviously want to respect people's preferences on whether this is done via SMS or email, but you essentially want to make sure that you're engaged with them immediately. And once you do that, you will figure out the people, who essentially make sense for you. You're going to either screen them in and say, they meet all my criteria, I want to have them talk to a recruiter, but 90% of the recruiter's work has already been done. The top 15 questions that my recruiter would have asked this person have already been asked by technology, which is the only reason I'm even putting them in front of a recruiter so they can determine next steps. And if there are people who don't meet that criteria, you essentially can recycle them, and you can essentially go, all right, let's redirect you back to our job site, or maybe this isn't the best fit for you, but let's show you some other roles. And if you don't have any other roles, you can put them in an automated nurture journey to say, we're now going to stay in touch with you. We know exactly what you want. We know exactly, what your screening questions were. And when the new job opens up that fits you, we will be in touch with you then. That's your database. So this is essentially what you do for sourcing and screening. And you can do that now using an artificial intelligence-based chatbot, a conversational recruiting assistant. It has a number of advantages. I won't go into all of them, but first of all, the biggest advantage it gives you is scale. You can do this with 10,000 people, 100,000 people, all within a second, where you can screen all the people and find out, here are the 1% of folks that should be actually talking to a recruiter. And you could make this super job specific. So very different questions that you would ask somebody when you're hiring them for a professional role versus when you're hiring them for a light industrial role. Anybody who clears these questions, anybody who answers these questions, you can automatically schedule them. So none of this needs recruiter intervention. Imagine yourself going to the website of one of these forward-thinking companies, and within 3 minutes, you've answered a few questions, you've secured a meeting with a recruiter who is already interested in you because you check a certain number of boxes. And now imagine this happening 24/7, not just 8 to 5, not just 9 to 5. It happens at your schedule. If you are one of those people who only looks for jobs after hours, 7 p.m., midnight, whenever you do, the chatbot is available for you to talk to. There are several ancillary benefits here that I won't even delve too deeper into. For example, a chatbot will remove any bias from the hiring decisions. So if you are somebody that a recruiter might have had a bias against, a chatbot won't. So anyway, keeping in mind our talent journey, this is the first part of our talent journey where you're capturing people, you're screening them, you're scheduling them, and you're getting them to a point that they're talking to a recruiter, and this is going to be a meaningful, warm conversation. So with that, I'm going to shift this back to Jason to actually show you this in real life on what this looks like, how easy and slick this can be, even though I say so myself. And then from there, we'll talk about step 2 on once you've had them engage with the recruiter, what happens next. So Jason, over to you.
All right, let me share my screen and we'll show you a little bit about the Sense chatbot and what those conversations might look like. And I think the biggest point there, I'm going to minimize Sense for a second. We're going to take a look at this from an actual candidate perspective. But the biggest thing, I think Pankaj was talking about was this works and engages with people when they're ready. So we can send out communications. I'm actually going to start with a web-based chatbot. Web-based chatbot here, which is essentially asking us to update our profile. So this goes out, this could be for a dormant database, people never finish their application, whatever the case is, or we might be missing certain pieces of data in that profile. And we want to go fishing for that data so we can more accurately, match them and service them. So, real quick, conversation should only take a few minutes. We introduce ourselves as a recruiting assistant, and we're asking what their zip code is. So I can go ahead and put some information in, but oops, I didn't put it in correctly. So I think the biggest takeaway here is we can go fishing for information. We're also going to validate that information as we're intaking it. And then best phone number, put in mine here. And then the other thing that's nice about web-based chatbots is, the ability and ease of use for the end user. Like I can just come in and touch my phone, so I don't even have to enter and type anything in. Say I'm looking for hourly. What's my rate? I'm going to say I'm looking for $19 an hour. What's my job title? I'm just going to say tester. And what's my work authorization? So I'm going to say green card. One of the nice things too, anytime you have autonomous communications, you want to make sure that when people are talking to it, their information is correct. So I'm going to say, actually, I need to edit this. My work authorization is actually US citizen. So it looks good now. And then happy to set the time for chat. I'm not going to show you this just a second because I'm actually going to show it to you in the other chat bot. So I'm going to say no, I don't want to schedule any time. And then a quick rating. So anytime you're using communication like this, you want to make sure it's doing an effective job. So we always collect a rating and pay attention if there's any drop off along the way. The other way in which we might be communicating is via an SMS conversation. In this case, this is a pre-screen. So going back to what I was just saying, this is for a specific role. In this case, it's for a warehouse worker. But of course, you're going to have different ones set up for, whether it's for a nurse, whether it's for a developer, whether it's for a lawyer, whatever the case is. We can go ahead and have the appropriate questions triggered and communicated as soon as that person applies. So I'm going to say, sure, I'm happy to answer a few more questions. And then you can see there, I didn't answer exactly. So that's where the AI comes into play, understanding real English. And then the first question it's asking is, will I wear a mask for COVID? Which started not to be relevant, but starting to be relevant again. And then the last item here is I can continue the conversation at none. If this had been triggered for real, what we would see is actually a link for them to continue via web-based chatbot if they want. I'm going to say yes, that I will wear a mask. And I stand on my feet. Thing. And then what am I looking for? There's no buttons in an SMS conversation, so I can just use a shortcut. And do I have reliable transportation? And just a few more questions here. And what's going to happen is, during this process, it's asking me probably 8 questions. But at some point, there's going to be a disposition, right? It's going to go ahead and say, did this person pass or did they not pass? Am I able to work overtime? And I think one last question of, will I submit to a background check? And this, assuming they answer yes to this, that can automatically trigger Checkr to initiate that background check. And then, of course, I'm going to review my information. I'm going to say, A, it looks good because we're reviewing the information, because right after this, we're essentially making a decision. And since I did pass, it's now asking me when I'd be available to start. I'm going to say next month. And as I'm putting in data like this, and just like I was in the previous chatbot, the key is too, that we're writing this information all back to the individual fields in the ATS. So not only is this being effective for communication off hours, but it's keeping the profiles correct without any recruiter or talent acquisition, people having to key anything in. In this case, it's saying, great, you passed. Let's go ahead and schedule a little time. So this is going to take us to a calendar. And this calendar could be single recruiter's calendar. If there was recruiter ownership, it could be a group of recruiters, maximizing for availability. I can just click that and confirm. And that's a real integration with the calendaring system, whether that's Google or Exchange or whatever the case is. And we have success, but in the background, I do have my notifications turned off. You see, we also received a few more texts. We successfully scheduled a meeting. We're very excited to connect. And then another quick rating. So those were 2 super quick, super simple examples of how the interaction can take place autonomously with the chatbot. And then the last thing I'll highlight before I hand it back to Pankaj to talk a little bit more about the other pieces of Sense is I'm going to go into conversations. So this is where the conversations are managed. But of course, anytime you're taking advantage of AI, you want to make sure that there are templates and it's not a heavy lift to get it going. So Sense will take care of that for you. If I go into the example here, actually, before I even go into the example, just going back to what we support, we showed you data enrichment, essentially that reach out to passive. We showed you pre-screening. I didn't show you sourcing, the inbound chatbot, but of course we do support an inbound chatbot profile intake as well. And then if I go into an actual chatbot, and we're going to go into the one we were just looking at to make sure it's continuous here. It's just a workflow diagram. And we have these templates ready to go, and then you can modify them as you see fit. But the key is that you can ask as many questions as you want. We're going to build these for you. You can adjust them as necessary. But from a functional perspective, it's really important that you have, some nice logic in here, asking the right questions for that role. You allow them to correct their data. You evaluate them when they pass or not. And then we can update data within the system. So availability start, you update that. But because they pass the chatbot, we're also updating the status of that candidate against the application as passed pre-screen. We're notifying people, we're scheduling time, and of course, we're thanking them for their efforts. Now, if I need to make a modification or build a new one, I very quickly can do so in this interface. Click build, it's automated and ready to go in 15 minutes from you clicking build, which means anytime you have a new role or you decide you need a new chatbot, if you want to, it can be end of conversation to active within an hour, which is huge, in addition to the standard, very quick engagement that we can have with chatbots and with automation to really shorten the time to hire. So on that, I'm going to hand it back to Pankaj to talk a little bit about automation.
Thanks, Jason. So, what Jason just went through is the first part of the talent journey that we talked about on how do you capture a large number of people, make sure you screen them and schedule them. So now that you have those folks, you now have to make sure that we start working with them and actually convert them to a hire, right? So the first thing is you can now have automation be your co-pilot, if you will. You can segregate these people, segregate the candidates that you've just got based on any criteria you want. I mean, could be a job, could be a location, could be the amount of money they want, could be the kind of communication that you want to send out to them. But essentially what automation would allow you to do is segment all these people and make sure that they're continuously being followed up and taken through this application and hiring process. So in the interest of time, we're just going to jump back into, we're going to jump back into talking about what that looks like, and Jason can show you more of that.
All right. So from here, I'm going to jump into journeys, just like Pankaj was talking about. And with the journeys, I'm not going to go too deep into this, but I do just want to give everyone a quick overview of really what people might be doing to take advantage of this, because automation can take place really through the entire life cycle of corporate recruiting, or if you're talking about staffing and recruiting, either way. So staffing, we can help out on the sales side, cold email marketing, lead nurturing, reverse marketing. Then we pick up what's in common, certainly the passive to active, reinvigorating that database, much like we were looking at with the chatbot. Background checks. So just jumping in here real quick, as an example, we might have a campaign that is really just going through processes in this instance with background check with Checkr to go through, initiate it. Then if there's any exception handling, follow that up, notify the candidate. And then if they don't answer that, do more follow-up. Process updates. So, once that background check's been submitted, all the information is correct. We give people that white glove treatment of it's in process, can give them all clear, and negative disposition, that would go internally for that to be communicated by the recruiter. Now, if I come back into the journeys, just continue on, there's a lot we can do there with candidate evaluation, right? So anytime a candidate comes in, they apply, there's usually a fair amount of process that goes on before they are negatively dispositioned or hired. And so we can help with that, including interview reminders, operational excellence surveys, or negative dispositions. They don't get the job, but you want to give them, not a black hole of communication, but you want to let them know and make sure there's a good taste in their mouth of your brand, even if they don't get the job, so they do come back at a later point. Then, of course, as people are getting ready to start, you have onboarding, onboarding as far as ramping people up with information, checking in to make sure everything's okay, reminding about onboarding documents. And then once people are either hired or hired permanently or on contract assignment, we want to do things like ask a manager how things are going, ask a candidate how things are going, do NPS surveys, ask for referrals, go ahead and send onboarding surveys. All these things can be automated through Sense. And then, of course, just standard notifications. And if they're on contract, redeployment. making sure that we can go ahead and confirm end dates, do things like give people tips and tricks about how to find their next role, ask them for a call to talk about what's been going well, what they're looking for in the next role, or even performance reviews and exit surveys. And then, of course, managing people as alumni, and then reinvigorating sales for the staffing and recruiting side. So there's a lot there. What I will leave you with is that when we're interacting, this is what a journey might look like for on assignment when someone's starting, like I said, either permanently or on contract. But we can send communications ramping up to that start date. We can send, in this case, notifications internally to the recruiter to remind them to check in. We send a first day survey to candidate. We might be sending, a communication to the hiring manager. How have things been going? Ask about the manager of the candidate, and then certainly things like net promoter score or referral asks. And I'm just going to jump in the net promoter score really quick to show you, yes, great, sending this out via SMS, we could have sent out via email. We're going ahead and asking a couple questions. But then the one thing I always like to know is we can be reflective of how they're feeling. So in this case, I can branch it, and net promoter score, if they're 8 or less, that's neutral or negative. So we're just going to go ahead and say, what could we have done better? But if they're positive, well, then we can give them a completely different response and say, hey, great, you had a good experience with us. Would you mind going and posting something on one of our social media outlets? So really dynamic interaction all the way around. And then, of course, from a triggering perspective, when these communications go out, you have all sorts of control about triggering things based off of when a piece of data changes, marketing sends, Monday morning at 9 a.m., top of everyone's inbox, or sending it around the start date, either prior or after, or even going so far as to send it, on maybe the second Friday when we know people are getting paid and they're happy. That's a great time to ask for referrals. So that's just a super high level of some of the automation that you can put in place to basically take some time off the recruiter's day, keep them from being admins, make them into closers. So on that,
and as you think about that, so like Jason said, I mean, first of all, you are actually just giving your recruiters superpowers, and one of the superpowers that we think about here is actually giving them the ability to do two-way text messaging. We have seen text messaging would change your response rates over email that are in the low single digits all the way to 50, 60, 70%. People tend to read their text messages almost immediately. It's one of the most elegant ways to engage with talent, specifically when you've gotten to a point where you're in the final stages. You're essentially giving them asking them for references or asking them, hey, here is the time that you have an interview. You're essentially at a point where this candidate is now very much engaged with you. And if you want to take that engagement and turbocharge it, you can certainly do that using text messaging. So again, in the interest of time, I'll throw this back over to Jason to show you how text messaging can be incorporated into your automation journey after you've captured these people, after you put them in automated journeys, and now how you can convert them into one-on-one conversations.
Excellent. So from here, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to jump over into an ATS, and we're going to use Bullhorn as the backdrop here. But really it works with any ATS. If we're talking about Workday, Taleo, SAP, JobView, whatever the case is. And so I have a little Sense icon in the lower right-hand corner, and I can click that open, and it will show me all my recent conversations. And I can see here, Kiz Richardson with the blue dot, that's a new one. So I can see all the conversation historically that's gone on here. And it's a little bit more colorful than you might be used to in standard texting. Part of the reason for that is, we're really trying to make life super simple for the recruiter. So we have blue, that's me actually individually interacting with this candidate. There's purple, that's a mass text, so I might have sent something out to 100 candidates at once, inquiring if they, were open to an opportunity. And then there's green. Green is automated. So part of what I was doing and showing and engage might have been sent out automatically. So in this case, we have this one going out via green automation, then Kiz followed up and replied, and then I picked the conversation up manually. So that's part of the power of, Sense doing a lot of heavy lifting. And then when people are interested, you pick up the conversation and continue on. You can also see down here that I have a scheduled meeting. So as you saw that scheduling take place, now it's telling me, great, Kiz is scheduled and ready to go. Now, one of the other things I can do, if I pull this out, is, of course, I can, sort, show me all the people I haven't read or I haven't replied to, so I don't ghost them. I can search through. But on the right-hand column, this is the benefit of having everything in all communication and engagement in one platform. You can see all the upcoming automations here as well as everything that's happened, whether it goes out via email, whether it goes out via chatbot, whether it goes out via text. See it all in one place while I'm interacting with that person. The other thing is, if I want to, I can make life super simple for myself. New message, grab all the numbers from the screen, add them to the message. So it's that easy. And then I can go ahead and do things like insert a template, because I never would type anything on a demonstration or webinar. But then I can also drop in a scheduling link, like you saw on the chatbot. So if people want to schedule time through here, they can. And then we also support either single lines or shared lines, depending on how you operate as a recruiting team. And there's delegation, so management can see their reports. People can delegate their inbox to someone else if they're out sick. And everything is logged in the ATS. So if I just come back in real quick to say Kiz's record, what you'll see here is that everything, as soon as the notes load, everything is logged that Sense is doing. So we can see either an SMS daily log or individual texts being logged, whichever your preference is. Or if we're looking at the automation, Sense event sent, Sense event response. So anytime anything's happening in automated fashion, it's all cataloged in the ATS. So on that, I will hand it back to Pankaj.
Yeah, so I mean, for everybody who's keeping tabs, what we have done so far is we've essentially gone from capturing candidates to getting them to a point that we've engaged with them and gotten them to a hire. And once you've gotten somebody to a hire, the next step is to essentially onboard those people. So, this is really where Checkr comes in. They absolutely do a fantastic job at becoming sort of an automation platform that allows this to happen. So, Chris, I'll have you, if you don't mind, talk through what the onboarding process as well as the background check process could look like.
Yeah, for sure. I'll try to be quick because this is a pretty big one. I absolutely love the onboarding process. I've consulted on this step hundreds and hundreds of times. I've actually led product strategy around onboarding before. And the reason I love it is because it's really the first interaction from when a candidate becomes an employee. And you know what they say about first impressions? You only have one time to actually do it. And, and I think I love it so much because there's, I've really seen the damage that can be done by a bad onboarding process. I have this concept, I call it shadow fallout or buyer's remorse, right? We've taken this very, I could even go as far as say intimate process from the recruiting cycle, and we've gotten everybody in the funnel. We made them feel really good. We had really artful written job descriptions, and then we offer accepted, and all of a sudden we turn it into a paper process again. And we forget that this is actually, and it's still in a very much so an emotional interaction with folks. And what do I mean by that? I mean, hey, I need to understand what they're going through. It can be very, very overwhelming. I mean, if we unpack the onboarding process at any given time, you've got the background check going on, which is effectively its own sub-process. You have tax forms that need signed, employee handbooks that need signed. There's credentialing happening. If we're white collar candidates, there's laptops getting delivered, maybe it's phone. I mean, there's all sorts of things happening. So that is where people can feel overwhelmed. And if they don't feel the love, that's where that shadow fallout happens. They start looking at those backup offers. They have phone calls from recruiters that are still happening. And I don't have to tell the folks on the call what the cost of a bad hire actually can be. And that's the same whether you're a staffing firm or if you're in corporate recruiting as well. So what we really like to do is take a look at this and make it a much more holistic process, right? The background check, really has its own thing going on, and it's like a sub process and everything else. But what I really, really love is when we take a unified experience for the candidates. Now, everything that we just looked at with Sense, so we've got this very familiar voice. It's this very familiar way of interacting. Now, that same familiar voice is handling the onboarding process as well, where classically, this was either the recruiter or it got handed off to an HR generalist. So I think we have one more slide here. We can unpack this a little bit more, just kind of like dig into the background check just a little bit. So by itself, Checkr's background check experience, like our native offline experience, is certainly amazing. It's what's really catapulted us in the on-demand economy. It's fluid. It's built for the modern candidate. It's everything that you expect, but it's still an outside process unless you actually integrate it with your ATS or your platform. So one of the things that I really, really love about the Sense partnership is that now we're taking all of that horsepower, and it almost is sort of ATS agnostic in that we're bubbling it up to that engagement layer where your candidates actually want to be engaged with. So if you go back to some of those mega trends that I was talking about earlier, it's less about the background check as a step or the onboarding process as a paper process, and it's more about that. How do I treat my candidate as a customer and create a much, much more unified, integrated experience? So now what we're talking about is the background check being triggered, which again, that's not new, but what is new is that the background check can actually be triggered as part of a much more holistic process. So now the recruiter and the candidate are kept in the loop with that, again, that familiar voice. So as the Checkr compliance engine's working, because we always want an instant background check, but the fact of the matter is that we still have to collect data from online and offline sources. And while we're doing that, Sense is actually standing in the gap to keep everybody informed. So the data is going both directions. It's going out to the recruiter and to the candidate. And one of the coolest things I really love about this, when we talk about frictionless, so there is a process that we call the exception process. It just happens. It happens with me. It's by no fault of the CRA. It's by no fault of the employer or the candidate. When I joined Checkr, they couldn't validate that I worked for the Adecco group, even though everybody knew. It's because they're registered as ADO staffing. So that exception process meant that I needed to supply forms. And I actually saw, Jason, when you were doing the demo, there's a way you can go in and begin to trigger those steps. So now Sense can actually engage and handle that exception process as well. So again, now we're talking about a super slick process that we already had, but now you've got that engagement layer sitting on top of it. And I mean, it's super, super slick. I love it. And we're going to get there in a second, but now once we actually get them onboarded, now we can even carry that on a little bit further once we get past the background check.
Yeah. So, so if you think about it, most people sort of think of background checks as something that happen only with onboarding. But keep in mind, that's not the only time you're screening a candidate. You've gotten them a job, that's fine. They're going to do this assignment for who knows, 3 weeks, 3 months, 6 months. But you want these people to continuously stay as part of your system. You want them to be, you want to make sure that you're still throwing at them, hey, here are jobs that you might be interested in as they're coming out of assignment. So let's talk for a minute about redeployment. Redeployment is absolutely the difference between a successful and growing staffing firm versus a stagnant staffing firm. If you can double your redeployment rates, and our customers will often quadruple them with Sense, that's the exact amount of revenue that you're adding to your top line. You're bringing down your cost per hire, and you're increasing your profitability and gross margin. So, if you don't have a formal redeployment program today, this is probably the number one thing that can increase both your top line and your bottom line. So, but think about this. So you now have this candidate, you're going to redeploy them after 3 months or 6 months. What's going to happen now? Are you going to do another background check on them? Is that going to become part of the process that maybe delays their assignment into a next assignment? I think this is where Checkr does something really unique, which is this whole idea of continuous screening. So as you think about redeployment, also think about incorporating continuous screening. And Chris, maybe you can talk a little bit more about what that means and what that looks like.
Yeah, continuous screening, it's pretty cool. When I was a Checkr customer, it actually was one of those big ideas that it wasn't quite built yet. And I found it super cool. And what it really means is that, background check is only as good as the day that you pull the data. And that's true for any CRA or any background check. So what we wanted to do is make sure that the workers are as compliant and as safe on day 365 as they are on day 1. And this really came out of our driver network business where, Uber's a big one. So think about an Uber driver. You want to make sure that that driver is as safe on month 6 as they were on month 1. And what we do, and it's, you know, a bit of secret sauce, but really there's listeners out there that are looking at arrest records, doing a bunch of different things. Also, in true to Checkr, we're listening for that data, but we're also making sure that we're only reporting on things that are compliant, meaning that, hey, there's laws, right? So yes, somebody arrested, that's great, but we want to make sure that it's a compliant piece of data that we can actually show. It's like everything that Checkr does. We want to make sure we're not injecting bias, and just because somebody was in the wrong place, wrong time, and it wasn't an actual real charge, we're not going to report that stuff. So it's a tremendous tool, and it's actually a tool. I'm looking at this slide here. Is that it's a good tool to use for this right here. So if you go back to earlier in the slide, or early in the presentation, we talked about the pixelated workforce. You know, people are on the move, and one of the big reasons, and I had that slide that 33% there, and it's because they're really driving after new opportunities. So the concept, like the tall people talk about, is creating their own gig economy, and what I mean by that is creating their own gig economy within 4 walls. That can be for a staffing firm, it can be for direct sourcing platforms, and I truly do believe it can also be for corporate recruiting as well. And one of the best ways to do that is through redeployment, as Pankaj said. And we do believe in nurture campaigns and continuous background check. If you're a staffing firm, you can begin to use the continuous check as a differentiator for your business. And I think it was a very foreign concept, because background checks, let's face it, 10, 20 years ago, they were complex. Heck, even like 5 to 7 years ago, they were complex, they were costly, full of risk, so much risk that a lot of staffing firms took the stance of plausible deniability. They almost looked at the background check as sort of crossing the dark forest and said, we're going to do it one time for every candidate, and we never want to do it again, because we don't want to open ourselves up to liability. But the fact of the matter is, today, through technology, background checks with Checkr are more compliant, more accurate, and faster than they've ever been. So we say, why rely on data that's X old? You should pull the data that's fresh and then use that as a differentiator for your business. And we actually have some partners who are really beginning to lean into this, and are using it to their advantage, and are doing it through pre-screening and continuous check models that now they're actually delivering candidates and filling orders in minutes, not hours and not days. So it's a really cool tool.
So Chris, this sounds like a really cool tool for if there was, if you were in an environment where you have people who come work for you for a couple of months, get another assignment, get another assignment, get another assignment. I mean, would you say this is a really cool tool for, hey, we've got this background check sort of updated all throughout that life cycle?
100%. It is a lights out solution for staffing now. And I get it. Listen, we're all looking at margins. So if you have 1 million people in your database, am I suggesting putting 1 million people in continuous check? No. But we all know there's volumes of workers that you do know you're generating revenue on. You do know that you're placing on assignment. And I think it's a step, right? But it's a step that now allows you to normalize some of your background check spend. It's a subscription based. So I have X people enrolled in continuous check. It looks and feels much more like posting jobs. So it's just an interesting conversation, but you have to be willing to be a little bit bold and kind of put some new ruts in the road.
Yeah, and I think this is sort of the heart of why I think an ecosystem partnership like ours is important, because if you're going to do a continuous background check and you have like new pieces of on an individual 7 times through their assignment or 7 times through a year, you just want to be able to make sure that that data keeps getting written back into the ATS. So what I'm really excited about is how Sense and Checkr do this together. But Jason, I'm going to throw this back at you again to walk us through how Sense and Checkr integrate and why that is important.
Excellent. Thanks, Pankaj. Yeah, I'm pretty excited to talk about this because there's a lot going on. And just to build on, what we were just talking about, if you're using an automation platform like Sense, the key is we can pay attention. If you're doing continuous background checks, we can only initiate those for people that have been on assignment for a long time, or for people maybe that were on assignment within the last 3 months or 6 months or something like that, and have worked with you at least for 1 or 2 assignments. So we can put that really powerful logic in there to make sure you're not wasting your money, but making sure you're keeping people ready to go constantly. Now, as far as the integration works, you can see first thing, and I'm going to click through some of this pretty quickly, but the background check is requested, and the background check can be requested systematically. or manual. So within the ATS, you can say, hey, I want to initiate a background check from this person, or it can be, as a disposition like we were looking at in the chatbot. And then we go ahead and we initiate that, and that will go ahead and collect the invitation from Checkr, which will send out. But then we're going to keep that constant line of communication open with the candidate, saying, hey, that's great. Here's your link, and we've initiated it, or maybe there's an exception. So they provide their information consent, and then now it gets to the point of communication. We have an exception, all clear, negative disposition. Like I said, that would go back to the recruiting team, let them communicate that. But it can be an iterative process too. So if there is an exception, then we can remind people we're providing those communications via links in both email and text. And then, of course, all this information at the same time is being written back in the ATS. And when I say written back in the ATS, I'm not just talking about notes like we are looking at here, which certainly will happen as well. But in addition, we're going to be keeping things like the background check information within the profile. So we can see that the last background check status is all clear. The last one was done in July, and this was a background check that was run. So we'll have all that fielded in notes, and of course, the flow is very seamless.
Yeah, that's amazing. So, background checks are something that probably every single one of you do today. This is just a provocative way to essentially tell you about how you can do them in an automated fashion, which absolutely reduces your time to hire, gives you a leg up on your competition, and at the same time keeps you way more compliant, especially if you are in a workers' comp or a light industrial type environment, because you will have more up-to-date data versus what you had 6 months ago. So, the meat of the webinar today was, this is why Sense and Checkr have come together, because we're both sort of modern age companies, if you will, that fundamentally believe in the fact that we need to do, however many ecosystem providers need to get together to make sure that we provide the absolute best experience to the end user. Our end user is the candidate. The candidate needs to feel like they got a consumer type experience. It was very white glove. They had no clue when Sense started and when Checkr finished. All they are really going through is a step-by-step process that is completely seamless. And as far as you as a business is concerned, it obviously makes your recruiters way more efficient. It increases your placement. It gives you a leg up on the competition. So if you think about, this is the life cycle, this is essentially the talent 360 view that we went through, from sourcing a candidate all the way to screening them, engaging them, pre-hire, getting them onboarded, and then redeploying them. But at this entire time, you will have various components of both Sense and Checkr that will stay engaged with these folks. So that's essentially what we wanted to cover today. We've got about 4 minutes left here in the webinar. We've got a couple of questions from the audience, so we'll take those questions until we have time. We promise we'll finish on time. But here is also the email address for all three of us. If you have additional questions, if you want to see Sense in action, if you want to see Checkr in action, please make sure you reach out to any of us. You can reach out to Chris, Jason, or myself for either of the products, for both the products, and we will be able to direct you to the right person. But anyway, I'll take a quick couple of questions that came in. The first question was, do Sense and Checkr work for all industries? So Chris, I'll let you tackle that first and I can chime in afterwards. I was sitting here thinking, your title is Director of Industry Strategy. This couldn't have been a better question.
Yeah, I definitely tipped my hand on this one a little bit. I do believe when we take a look at these sort of candidate focused digital engagement layers, I do believe that they are much larger than just staffing. I think a lot of us have cut our teeth in that, right? Gig economy, staffing as an industry, high velocity, high turnover. But again, if we go back and look at what our professional and our white collar workers want as well, they still are looking for those experiences. So can you imagine a world where I'm sitting at Checkr, I've been here 3 years, maybe I'm bored, but now I'm having Sense outreach to me and say, hey, Chris, there's these opportunities. Hey, Chris, what are you passionate about? And now it's beginning to build a profile for me to figure out where in the organization I want to go. I did a stint at Accenture, and maybe Checkr is a bit small because we also talk pretty much on a regular basis, but certainly in an ecosystem like in Accenture, where you're effectively an employed contractor, I can definitely see this working. So absolutely. All industries, staffing and professional, and even within staffing, 100% white collar staffing, blue collar staffing across the board.
Yeah, and I will echo that as well. When you look at Sense customers, we have customers across pretty much everything you can think of: retail, hospitality, logistics, manufacturing, trucking, sales and marketing, clerical and light industrial, so on and so forth. So we're definitely industry agnostic. I think you would see anytime you're wanting to do either high volume hiring, or if you're wanting to do hiring in which recruiter and candidate experience is important to you, all of these components are very, very valuable. Jason, this next question is probably for you, and I know you just went through this, but if you have anything else to add here, this question says, how does Sense integrate with Checkr? So we just talked about what does that data look like, and how can we use that data within Sense?
Yeah, so just to kind of echo what I was already showing, that question probably came a little earlier than what I was just talking, but to echo it, there's a bunch of different ways in which the two systems are interacting. If we're talking about, initiating background checks, that's where, like I said before, that can be initiated manually through the ATS and then through Sense, or it can be initiated through autonomous means like the chatbot. And then, of course, everything starts going into action, processes taking place, whether things are progressing, whether they're not progressing. And really the key is that, that Checkr is going to be, moving as quickly as it can, but it needs to communicate back to the end candidate. And by doing so, Checkr will be sending us information, then we're communicating out via text and email to make sure we get the quickest response possible. But as things progress, we want to make sure that we keep the data and visibility in the ATS in specific fields. So that therefore you're going to have the date it was initiated, the date it was finished, and you have that disposition, the status of that disposition, so you can run reports as necessary. And then, of course, we're recording everything into the activity section all along the way.
Yeah, and Jason, I think, and as we get more sophisticated, for instance, ETA is one of those things right now that we produce an ETA number. It's actually quite accurate. That's another one of those pieces of data that will come across out of the Checkr engine through the API into the Sense engine. And as that data, that sort of data calculation gets more advanced on our side, whether it's assessed matrices, it's mobility type matrices, that data will also come through the API and kind of roll downstream into the Sense platform.
Yeah, that'll be amazing for providing that really white glove treatment.
That's right.
Because if people are communicated with and always kept up to date, they always have a smile on their face, right? And that's the key. You want to keep people happy and engaged, because then they'll always be coming back.
Awesome. We are at time. So in respect for everybody's time, we're going to end the webinar here. Jason, Chris, thank you both so much for joining me. And thank you everyone for taking the time out of your day. If you have additional questions, please reach out to any of us. And please look forward to getting a copy of this webinar and the recording that will be automatically distributed to you. Thank you so much.
Right.
Thanks, team.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.